Welcome to the 15th episode of the 1796 podcast, a monthly podcast that features exclusive interviews and in-depth news about the Tennessee National Guard and the Tennessee Military Department.
The 1796 podcast is produced every month by the Airmen and Soldiers of the Tennessee National Guard Joint Public Affairs Office. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Malone.
And I'm Captain Hall, your co-hosts of the 1796 podcast.
This month, Colonel Andy Jordon and Command Sergeant Major Chad Stackpole, the garrison command team from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, join the podcast. Fort Campbell and the men and women that serve there are integral to our nation's defense. Colonel Jordon and Sergeant Major Stackpole will tell us all about it.
And of course, we'll brief you on the latest news impacting the Tennessee National Guard in our Tennessee Bluff news segment. First up, Lieutenant Colonel Malone sits down with Colonel Andy Jordon and Command Sergeant Major Chad Stackpole.
All right, listeners of the 1796 podcast, we are thrilled to be joined today by Colonel Andy Jordon, the garrison commander, and Command Sergeant Major Chad Stackpole, the garrison command sergeant major, both from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Gentlemen, welcome to the 1796 podcast.
Thank you. Welcome to Fort Campbell.
Man, we're thrilled to have you. Thank you, sir. All right, I'm going to start with an easy one here. If you look at the map, if you go to Google Maps or whatever, and if you look at a map at Fort Campbell, the Army post is in Tennessee and some is in Kentucky, but most of it looks like it's in Tennessee. So as a Tennessean, I have to ask, why do we always hear Fort Campbell, Kentucky?
Okay, well, hey, I'll take the first one right off the bat.
Thank you, Colonel.
It's really, it's pretty easy. It's where the United States Post Office is.
Yeah.
So the post office is on the Kentucky side of the state line. About, I would say, almost 80% of our landmass is actually on the Tennessee side of the state line. We take up 4 counties. We take up portions of Stewart and Montgomery County on the Tennessee side, and portions of Trigg and Christian County on the Kentucky side. But truly, it's the United States Post Office. So whenever you punch in 42223, you're going to get Fort Campbell, Kentucky. It's interesting, if you look at my headquarters from my office in the headquarters building, you can literally see the post office. You can see the state line. I try to explain to everybody who's in my office. I point over there and I say, you know what, my kids could hit a baseball from here to Kentucky. I couldn't quite do it, but it's about 400-ish feet from my window to Kentucky, and the post office sits probably less than 100 feet across the state line into Kentucky. So that truly is why it was. Another small fact though is the reason we were Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and the post office over there led to us actually being named after a son of Tennessee. Right. William Bowen Campbell. Mm-hmm. So there was a little bit of a compromise there between the states and the War Department back in '42, and they said, we're going to be Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and Tennessee said, okay, well, you can name it after one of our folks. So that's how it came to be.
In fact, as I was driving on post today, I came in from the northern route, so I was coming in on the Kentucky side, but when I came on post, my navigation said, welcome to Tennessee. All right, that was perfect, and you kind of may have taken away my next question I was going to ask. Are there any cool history facts or anything we need to know about Fort Campbell?
I'll kind of pick up that one. No,
please.
Something you mentioned earlier that most people don't factor. So when I was being told I was coming here to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I'd been stationed here before and understand how much land mass was actually on the Tennessee side. They're like, you have a unique base in which you're going to because you have 2 states and you have 4 counties. Mm-hmm. So when you look at that, most people don't factor that in regards to the relationships they have within the community. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of outreach here. And when you have that many people here in the surrounding area between Nashville and 24 up to Clarksville, how many small towns have kind of built up and enlarged? We've really expanded our living quarters out across all the way down to Nashville. So you look at how many people we retain in this area is because of that. Like it's just a good home setting. And we're up to, 43% now, sir, of our retirees that choose to stay right here in this immediate area. So I find that interesting that, while it is 2 states that we're here, it's one big community when you look at it at large. And it makes people want to stay here because of how comfortable they are. One of the additional things that I've been able to learn while coming on board is that following World War II, Fort Campbell actually housed 3 German prisoner of war camps here on the installation for about 1,000 prisoners of each of those 3 camps. So there are many folks that don't know about it, and some of the stuff that I was able to kind of learn as I came on board with some of the land mass that we have. I just found that was very interesting that we brought them here, nowhere near the coast of how they would have come in on ship, but then would have brought them in by train to turn around and get them here into the heartland of America in the South.
That's awesome. In fact, if people want to listen to the previous episode, we talk a little bit about World War II history. There's lots in Tennessee across the whole state. That's awesome. Thank you, Sergeant Major. Appreciate it. All right, Colonel Jordon, one for you. You actually started in the Oklahoma National Guard. What did you do there, and why on earth did you ever get out of the Guard? Why did you end up active duty? And tell us a little bit about your story, how you came to be where you are now.
Okay, well, so it is an interesting story. I've actually served in all 3 compos.
Right.
And I actually first enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserve.
Okay.
In a unit in Oklahoma City as a medic. I thought I wanted to go to medical school whenever I was a freshman in college, like a lot of freshmen in college, and I started taking science classes and realized my brain was wired a different way, so I switched to the business school. So in the meantime, I was already in ROTC. I had started taking ROTC and had decided, you know what, if I'm going to join the Army, I'm going to go into the infantry. So the opportunity arose for me to transfer over to the 45th Infantry Division. So I'm a Thunderbird soldier. I was a simultaneous member cadet while I was in ROTC, so I got to serve as a scout platoon leader in the Oklahoma Army National Guard while I was at Oklahoma State University, which was awesome. I mean, it was a great experience. Very historic unit that I have a patch from that I was able to wear. So that was really a great honor, and to be able to say that you've served in all 3 compos is a pretty neat experience. But I decided after I graduated from college that I wanted to make the Army my career, at least for the first 3 years. I think like a lot of individuals that come in, nobody 100% realizes or believes that 25 years later they'll still be sitting in the seat and wearing the uniform. So after I graduated from Oklahoma State, I decided, you know what, I'll go on active duty and try this for a few years, and it stuck. My wife and I are here still 25 years later, and enjoying serving in the United States Army.
Awesome. Sergeant Major Stackpole, got the same question. Tell us a little bit about your career, how you ended up where you are now.
So I joined the Army right up the road from Bowling Green, Kentucky. So graduated from high school there, knew at that point that I wasn't going to go to college, and joined with about 9 of my friends. It was before Kosovo kicked off, so it wasn't really a war-driven effort. It was more of a, we need college money. I was the oldest of 4. I had no intentions of going to school, but I kept telling them, I'll go with you and get some college money. I started out as a young paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division, and was groomed by some of the finest NCOs I've ever served with in my entire career. One of them convinced me that I should probably re-enlist and consider. He knew I wanted to marry my high school sweetheart, and I actually re-enlisted and came here to Fort Campbell. I spent 7 years here at the height of the war. Never wanted to leave, but eventually I had to go be a Ranger instructor.
Right.
I had to go out and get some TRADOC time and broaden my career a little bit. So yeah, that was kind of really what got me going on my path. And then at that point I started re-enlisting. I was like, you know what, I kind of like this. I don't want to get out. This is kind of the thing that I want to do. I don't want to get out and go to school. I've already started a family. I kind of like where we're going as a country. I felt really patriotic and very proud to serve. So re-enlisted again. I know I could see this in the questions leading into this. While I was in Fort Benning, I won the Best Ranger competition. Right. And one of the perks of that is I got to go with our regimental command team and go up and watch the changing of the guard of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And as we were getting paraded around the AUSA convention, everyone asking us, where do you want to go? What jobs do you want to do? And I looked at him, I was like, well, to be honest with you, I'd like to be a tomb guard. I've never seen this, but I think it's amazing. And I kind of got a funny side-eye look, like, are you serious? That's what you want to do?
Right.
Well, I ended up getting injured and breaking my back, and had a couple of areas that I needed to have some surgery done on. It just kind of fell in place. The regimental sergeant major for the old guard happened to be standing there. Was really good buddies with my regimental CSM at the time, and he took my social down, and within 4 hours I was on assignment.
Right.
And so I ended up going up to the old guard, did a year there on the Presidential Firing Party platoon, and then got selected by my first sergeant to go over, and who was a prior tomb guard and grew up in the 75th Ranger Regiment after that. And the rest was history. Kind of like that was the bug that got me going.
Very cool. Yeah, we will come back to that. So, absolutely. Colonel Jordon, one for you. So, you went to Air Force Air Command and Staff College. Tell us, what was that like? What was Maxwell like? Why did you choose the air side versus the Army side?
Well, to be quite honest with you, it was a geography question.
Sure.
So I first came to Fort Campbell in 2004. I was assigned to 5th Special Forces Group, straight out of the Special Forces qualification course, and the war was really at its height at that point. And in the meantime, my parents actually moved from Oklahoma to Clarksville, Tennessee, because I had the only grandchildren at the time. So we knew that my wife was going to go to graduate school, and I was going to go back and forth to Iraq. So Grandma and Grandpa said, "Hey, we'll come out and be close to the grandkids." So we kind of settled our family in this area. And when the opportunity arose for me to know that, hey, I can go get my ILE credit and go 4 hours down the road to Montgomery to Maxwell. And oh yeah, by the way, the Air Force was providing a master's degree program at the time. And at that time, if you went to Fort Leavenworth, you had to go to night school to get your master's. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go try the Air Force, go hang out with them for a bit, and be 4 hours down the road and come straight back to 5th Special Forces Group. So that's what happened. We very much enjoyed our time at Maxwell. Montgomery's a great city. My wife is from Mississippi, so it was a little bit closer to home for her at the time, and it was really a good experience. It was a good joint flavor down there. We had, my seminar had members from all branches and all compos. My kids went to school right there on Maxwell Air Force Base, so I walked my kids to school every day, and I picked them up most days as well. So it was a really good experience, and I'm really, really thankful that I was able to do that. Fast forward, 2 times in my career later, I've been stationed on Air Force Base. On an Air Force Base, I've done two tours at Maxwell or MacDill Air Force Base down in Tampa. So really enjoy that. And I see your U.S. Air Force name tape. You guys always have the nicest golf course too.
Absolutely.
So
I don't know. The one here's pretty nice. I stayed right next to it with a friend.
Cole Park is a nice one for those that are looking for a championship golf course in Clarksville, Tennessee.
There you go.
I'll do my shameless plug for MWR and come play Cole Park.
All right, that's awesome. All right, Sergeant Major Stackpole, you took us through your career. You mentioned first place in the Ranger competition. I know you also got second place once. We may ask you about that too. And you mentioned Tomb of the Unknown. So what kind of discipline, what kind of training does it take to do 2 totally different things like that? What's your perspective on that?
I think ultimately for me and what I always tell, I'll focus on Best Ranger at first.
Sure.
Everyone always thinks you're in a competition to go out and compete against others. And ultimately for me, my first year ever being exposed to Best Ranger, I watched Sergeant Major Doug Greenway, a Ranger legend, compete with his son, Brennan Greenway, in 2007. And I sat there and I was like, I am a staff sergeant sitting here giving kill, no-kill commands on a grenade assault course. And I'm watching a 30-year veteran Sergeant Major go through this. And I looked at my buddies, I was like, I will never run this event again. I will compete as long as I'm here. And so the very next day, my buddy and I, who had competed, he ended up finishing 16th, and he had that itch. He's like, I think we should start training together. And so we spent all our time training and getting ready for that next competition. And one of the things he always told me as we were going through it is, there's the rabbit in the race, but then there's your own race. And he goes, if you don't focus on your own race and you focus on others around you, you're going to lose sight of the goal. So I always share with them, one of the things that helped me out is like you're competing against your own abilities. So don't expect what you don't inspect, and don't expect results for something you haven't prepared for. So it really came down to the attention to detail and the finer arts of it. Everybody's going to be a physical specimen, and they're going to look like, Leonidas chiseled out of stone when they pull their shirt off out there at the competition, right? But it was really the ones that were mentally strong that could dial in and focus. That piece there, taking that to the tomb and learning how to break down the knowledge to where it just didn't become rote memorization, but you actually knew why things were in place and the history that led into the unknowns, and you understood about Arlington National Cemetery and the historical figures that were there, and how you had to share the Army story with the American public and the world who came to visit to get them to understand and truly respect the grit of the American soldier. That piece for me, breaking down the uniforms, understanding the knowledge and the intricacies and how technical it was to do that walk, to inspect the rifle, inspect the service member who was or the guard who was going on to the mat, and handing over that responsibility. Like that carried over from Best Ranger into being a tomb guard. And I was able to share my experience because obviously you're the new guy. I went in as a sergeant first class to be a guard, and I became the sergeant of the guard at the end of my 9-month training.
Right.
So there is no freebie because of your rank. Like,
Right.
you still go through the in-depth level of training, but I was able to share from my experience and got immediate buy-in with the team by going through every aspect of that with the soldiers. So by sharing my stories from my time at Best Ranger, it really helped build upon the team, and it kind of gave them a new appreciation for what they were doing, as opposed to, hey, we're just out here guarding.
That's great.
Really built a sense of ownership.
Yeah. So you finished second and first in Best Ranger. Did you learn anything from finishing second?
Oh, sir, that's the most humbling, because for me that year, the entire front row at the end of the third day, and obviously the fourth morning is the award ceremony, the official award ceremony. My partner was an absolute physical specimen. Staff Sergeant Carlos Chevy Mercado, and he had done well the year before. I was actually deployed forward in Afghanistan and was on the same compound as the young officer who had won it that year. And we were joking. He's like, yeah, Sergeant Major, I'm training for Best Ranger. And I was like, sir, I'm too old for that. So I ended up competing 8 years after the fact. And when I showed up and redeployed, my division leadership looked at me and said, hey, we could use your experience. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll coach. And they're like, oh, no, you're competing. Yeah. And I was like, oh, sounds good to me. Right?
Right.
Not that I really wanted to do it at 37 years of age, but I got out and assessed with a team and felt, okay, I could kind of hang with these guys. Now, Chevy was just on another level, and I was just kind of riding his coattails.
Right.
But what I learned from that experience, sitting back and being a previous winner, is everybody on the front row had already won it before or had just won it that year. Yeah. And I was able to tell my partner, we had one bad event that was a weighted 10 event, and we came in dead last on it, and it took us out of the running. Yeah. But I told him, I was like, buddy, you're on the front line with winners. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I learned more from watching and walking you through this process and teaching you what you had to get to gain in the future by coming in this. It was very humbling for me, but it was also rewarding to watch my buddy Master Sergeant Joshua Horsager win that competition, and to see that young officer, Captain Rose, win it for the second time. He's the only person to ever compete 3 times and win it 3 times. Wow. So I feel like I'm in good company coming in second, and I'll gladly step to the side to see someone like that do that, perform at that level, as well as seeing a good Ranger buddy win the competition for the first time.
That's great perspective. Thank you for that so much. So, all right, before we move on to some other topics, if you gentlemen are good, we will send it over to Captain Hall for our news segment. Captain Hall?
Up first this month in the Tennessee Bluff, the Tennessee National Guard once again hosted Merit Badge University, a unique partnership between the Tennessee National Guard and the Scouts. With more than 300 Scouts in attendance, soldiers, airmen, and volunteers with the Tennessee Emergency Management Agency offered 22 specialized Merit Badge classes for Scouts to earn. Scouts from the Middle Tennessee Council and across the state were invited to attend. After the day-long event was over, more than 300 Merit Badges were earned by Scouts from across the state. And in national news, the Army is instituting a nationwide safety stand-down for all UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters. The mandatory safety training comes after several training incidents led to fatalities at multiple bases across the country. Nationwide, the Army Guard flies 948 Black Hawks, which is roughly 40% of the Army's fleet. The safety training will include topics like flight planning, risk assessment, and safe multi-ship operations. That's our Tennessee Bluff for this month. Now back to Colonel Malone.
Thank you, Captain Hall. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about Fort Campbell proper and the units that are here. So for those of us that don't know, we hear Fort Campbell. Sometimes that's synonymous with 101st Airborne, and some people may not know the difference. So what all units are here? What's y'all's responsibilities, and what's the interrelationship, and how does all that work together here at Fort Campbell?
Okay, so Fort Campbell really is synonymous with the 101st Airborne Division, but we also have several other very historic organizations that have done a lot, especially when you look at what our nation has asked of our soldiers and this installation in the last 20 years or more. Whenever I'm out in the community, I talk about when the phone rang on 9/11. The morning of 9/11, 2001, it truly did ring here at Fort Campbell. You have 5th Special Forces Group here. You have the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. And within weeks of 9/11, those two organizations already had soldiers in Afghanistan. And then the first conventional organization to leave here was 3rd Brigade Combat Team, the Rakkasans of the 101st Airborne Division. So when the phone rang on 9/11, it truly was answered here at Fort Campbell. I think this installation had probably, in my opinion, if not the largest role initially in the global war on terror, it was very close to the top of that between 5th Group, 160th, and then the 101st. But we also have other organizations. We have the 52nd EOD Group, which is headquartered here, and they have explosive ordnance disposal responsibilities over a very large geographic area, not just on Fort Campbell. We have the 531st Hospital Center. Interesting about that, you want to talk front line. In the spring of 2020, when COVID first hit, the 531st, within 48 hours of notification, had sent soldiers from Fort Campbell to the Javits Center in New York and undoubtedly saved the lives of our fellow Americans when we were fighting an enemy that we could not see. You know, we did not know what COVID held for us in March of 2020, but soldiers from Fort Campbell got on an airplane and deployed to New York to save their fellow countrymen. So that was great. We have a dental activity here. We have the 502nd Military Police Battalion, which is a criminal investigative battalion, CID. We have an NCO Academy, which is really critical to grooming, growing, and producing that next generation of non-commissioned officer leaders right here at Fort Campbell. And we also have a responsibility where soldiers come from other Army installations to go to the NCO Academy. We've got a field hospital. We've got Blanchfield Army Community Hospital, which takes care of not only our active duty service members, but our Army families and our retirees as well.
And I'll add our Air Guard, Army Guard, AGRs.
Yes,
they come there
absolutely.
as
They
well.
come to
Sorry
Blanchfield. No, you're right. So we truly do have a joint flavor here. We have Air Force units. We have the 19th Air Support Operations Squadron, which works down at Campbell Army Airfield. We've also got the Detachment 4 Weather Squadron, which provides weather updates for the 101st Airborne Division. They also are critical to weather events here at Fort Campbell. And there again, the Tennessee Army National Guard has got a component here. But funny, you say that, the Tennessee Army National Guard's motor pool on Fort Campbell is actually on the Kentucky side of the state line. So I don't know if you get taxed for that or not.
I don't know.
But
let's not talk anymore about
that. So no, that's a little bit of the flavor that we have here at Fort Campbell. But I really do like to talk about the history of those units. You talked to 101st Airborne Division. I'm not certain that there is not a more recognizable patch when you look at Army insignia across the globe. Right. You see the 101st Airborne Division patch, and that is just synonymous with America, and it's highly recognizable regardless of where you're at. So Fort Campbell has a lot of history, a lot of historic units, and we're very glad that they call Fort Campbell home.
That is the Screaming Eagle patch for our listeners, and I drove in on Screaming Eagle Boulevard today. Yes, absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, sir. So y'all do garrison command. How does that fit in with everything? What do y'all do? What do y'all take care of?
The unicorn, sir.
So what's interesting is the garrison is the installation itself.
Right.
We have about 2,000 civilian employees that make up the garrison, Department of the Army civilians. There's very, very few soldiers that are assigned to the garrison. Command Sergeant Major, myself, some of our installation chaplains in our religious service office, and then a headquarters company, and that's really the majority of the green suit soldiers that are assigned to the U.S. Army garrison. So you have an installation that is run by Installation Management Command with the garrison as its kind of operational arm of that. I always like to talk about why the garrison exists and why our 2,000 Department of the Army civilians come to work every day. And that truly is to provide every resource and every opportunity so that our warfighters that I just went through the list prior to, that those warfighters have every opportunity and resource to train to their wartime mission and go forward and fight and win our nation's wars. Right. So that's why the garrison exists. The other reason they exist is to take care of our families that we leave behind. Having been a veteran of Fort Campbell and been here on numerous occasions prior to assigned to the 5th Special Forces Group, I know firsthand what it's like to leave my family at Fort Campbell and know that someone is going to take care of them while I'm forward deployed. So I talk to our team all the time about making sure that in the days of instant message, that a soldier who's getting ready to go into harm's way and getting ready to leave the safety of their fob or wherever they may be and go out on a 12-hour patrol, that they don't get that instant message that it's January, my hot water heater broke, or it's July and the air conditioner's broken. If they get that message from their spouse back here at Fort Campbell, their mind is not going to be focused on the enemy to their front and their battle buddy to their right and left. Their mind is going to be focused on their family back here.
Right.
Our job as the garrison is to make sure that those phone calls and messages are mitigated, that we're not going to bat 1,000. Nobody can. But our families need to know that if they have those challenges and issues, that it's going to be taken care of by a Department of the Army professional as quickly and as efficiently as possible, so that soldier forward in harm's way can focus on the enemy to their front and their battle buddy to their right and left. And I do that under the direction of the senior mission commander. The senior mission commander at Fort Campbell is Major General J.P. McGee. He has two hats. He's the senior mission commander of Fort Campbell, and he's also the commanding general of the 101st Airborne Division. So under his senior mission commander hat, that's where Command Sergeant Major Stackpole and I get our authority as the garrison commander and command sergeant major, and we answer to him and we execute his senior mission commander guidance for the installation, so that he can then focus as well on his other role as the commanding general of the 101st Airborne Division.
Oh, so important. Yes, thank you for that. Anything to add, Sergeant Major?
I'd like to add on it in regards to the green suiter side. We're here to bridge the gap. There's vice versa. There are our Department of the Army Civilian Corps who are subject matter experts in their field, and they may not understand why the tenant units are requesting things or need certain things. And we're here to kind of bridge that gap, vice versa, between the tenant units and the Department of the Army civilians and our veterans. Sure. So we spend a lot of our time learning from our experts who are doing things because of the constrictions and restrictions that they have in place, and then going down to the unit user level to share with them why things are the way they are. Ultimately, we're here at the end of the day on behalf of the senior commander to make sure that we're providing world-class services to all of our soldiers, their families, our civilians, and our veterans. So I think that's the most unique thing that I've learned coming in this, because there's nothing that prepares you for garrison command. The commander, like he says all the time, he can move into a third world country and turn around and establish operations and set them up for success in defending themselves and running a country. I could turn around and tell you anything about light fighter operations from an infantry standpoint, from riflemen all the way up to command sergeant major. But there's nothing that teaches you for garrison command. So we learn a lot from our civilian corps of things that, like, I wish I would have known this when I was a first sergeant and I had these complaints about barracks. Now I understand why, or I'm getting a better appreciation for why things are the way they are. And so MCOM does a good job when they're onboarding us to let us know, like, you are not the subject matter expert anymore, and you better find out who is, because as situations arise and crisis comes, you need to know who's in your foxhole and who's going to help you get it across the finish line and taking care of the installation.
Awesome. All right. Is there anything else you need to tell us about Fort Campbell that you haven't told us already, that we just really need to know, or something on the post that people need to know about?
I think what it comes down to is, it doesn't matter what compo you are.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what branch you are. At the end of the day, we're joint. This installation doesn't see it as an Army base. Our Department of Defense has done a really good job of changing that. So if you're a National Guard, if you're a reservist, you're from the Marine Corps, you're active duty, Navy, Coast Guard. I don't think we have anybody retired from the Space Force yet.
Right.
But at the end of the day, Fort Campbell exists for everyone.
Awesome.
And we are here. All our services are open to them, whether it's hunting and fishing, whether it's coming in for swimming, partaking in our golf courses. Our gate is open for everyone. We are here to serve. And I could tell you, when I was going through my training, when I told everyone where I was going, they're like, "You're going to the best How'd you get so
Right.
lucky? You are going to the best garrison command in the United States Army. And I was like, oh wow. They're like, you're gonna have the easiest job ever because your civilians truly know what needs to be done to meet the senior commander's intent and to set you and your garrison commander up for success.
That's great. Sounds like a great place to work. Okay. It is our tradition here on the 1796 podcast when we have a seasoned guest to ask them what's their best piece of leadership advice for our listeners. We got a lot of airmen and soldiers out there listening, so take turns, gentlemen. What's your best piece of leadership advice?
You want to go first? You want me to go first?
I could start this one, sir. I think everybody thinks they have the right answer, and they may not have all of the facts and all of the details. I think ultimately when I look at this is brilliance in the basics and know your roles and be ready when called upon for your specific area of operation. You know, it's very easy to turn around and think you know and say, oh, I would have done it this way. But I think ultimately what I would share with them is understanding that your senior leaders truly have the interest for the greater good when it comes down to making decisions, and they understand risk, and they understand the friction that could come when a leader makes a decision. And we understand that every choice we make has a consequence, whether good or bad. We understand that, and we understand what we're asking of them, but ultimately we have to take for the greater good. So I would tell you, like, your time's going to come when you're in those positions, and sometimes they're not as easy and as fun as you think of just, oh, I want to be promoted, I want to make it up there. But enjoy your time going through the ranks and truly master what's there so you don't forget when you get to the positions, and you don't forget about, you know, how our decisions or how your decisions in the future will impact the formation at large.
Great advice. Thank you. Colonel?
No, there's a couple of things I have written down here, but I want to caveat on one of the things that Sergeant Major Stackpole just said. Enjoy your time as you go through the ranks, as you progress through your career. I actually told a young officer this just the other day, last weekend. I was at an ROTC ball, and he was the guest speaker. He had spoken about some of these jobs that he went into throughout his lieutenant years that he really didn't know, why am I doing this job? You know, why did I get pulled out of my platoon? I just wanted to be a platoon leader whenever I joined the Army right out of college, right? And I told him, and I've learned this over the last 25 years, typically speaking, the jobs that I went into clawing my way to stay out of, I learned the most whenever I came out on the far end.
So true.
You know, I came out of the Special Forces qualification course. All I wanted to do was be a Special Forces Operational Detachment Alpha, an SFODA commander. And I got to do that. I had the greatest job I could ever ask for at 28 years old whenever I, was able to be part of my ODA, conducting operations in the Middle East. Greatest job I ever had. And then the battalion commander came and said, hey, I need you to be the support company commander. Man, there were claw marks all the way down the hall, out of the team room, down the hall. But you know what? I learned so much in that job. I had an awesome first sergeant, had an awesome team, and I came out, and that job I think really prepared me then to go on and become a field grade officer as a major, and then progress from there. So I told this young man, he kind of gave me a quizzical look, but I was like, the job that you were going to go into kicking and screaming, you're going to learn the most out of. Some of the other things I would say as a leader, and this is another one. I learned it as a lieutenant in the 82nd Airborne Division. You are first out the door and last in the chow line. And what that means to me is that means I am the first one to step into harm's way. That means you're going to put yourself in danger before you're going to put your soldiers in danger, and you're always going to put your soldiers' care and well-being in front of your own. I think that's kind of the basis of, especially those junior soldiers, junior officers, tactical level leadership. Take care of your soldiers and take care of their families, and be a servant leader. Yeah. You are not put in that leadership position because of who you are or what you are, or to get any benefit out of that leadership position. Now, granted, you're usually put there because somebody believed in you, so I should probably, say that. Nothing happens by chance, obviously, but you were really put there to take care of those soldiers. You were put there to be their servant leader and make sure that they had the opportunity to succeed in their career. One of the best things you can ever see as a leader is to see those that you've had the honor to lead progress in their career, get promoted, get selected for command positions and things like that. So take care of them and then take care of their families. Because a successful soldier at work is obviously supported by a family at home. The more you take care of their family, the more they know that they have trust and confidence in their leadership, and that when we ask them to go do hard things, they're gonna do it even better.
Yeah. Colonel Jordon, Sergeant Major Stackpole, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for the information about Fort Campbell, for the mentorship advice, the leadership advice, and just sharing your experiences with us. Thank you for joining us on the 1796 podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks for listening to the 1796 podcast. If you like what you heard, please consider subscribing, sharing this episode with friends, and giving us a 5-star review. The 1796 podcast is produced by the Tennessee National Guard Joint Public Affairs Office. For more information, please visit www.tn.gov/military.